Hello, and welcome to my contribution to the Supplier Summit. Today I'm talking about solving staffing issues through company culture. Now, first, we'll get the uncomfortable part out of the way, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself, but also why I get to sit here today and talk about this with any amount of authority. My name is Sarah Murphy. I have been in the hospitality industry for 60% of my life. I started my very first job at 16 as a bus girl, and I'm about to turn 40. It's my birthday week, so yay. I have my master's degree from Cornell's Hotel School. That was my second advanced business degree. So I have spent about $100,000 in learning how to speak with authority on business matters. And it doesn't mean that I'm any smarter than anyone, but I am more financially invested in knowing what I know. And also, I have come through the ranks of learning from other industry experts. And so what I present to you today is based on studies. It's based on a lot of experience talking with hundreds and even thousands of other business owners and having taught leadership development, operational development in a number of capacities throughout my career. I am currently a full-time business coach, and I specialize in educating hospitality-based businesses and enabling them to break through to their next level of growth, whether it be through employee development, whether it be through staffing, whether it be through operational changes, any number of things. I like to speak on culture. I also like to speak on profitability and visibility. So what we're talking about today is culture. So I'm excited. First, I want to tell you a little bit about Mobile Bev Pros. It is my baby. It is the #1 site in the world for learning how to start and scale an industry-leading mobile bar or beverage catering company. So if we have any bartenders out there that have ever wanted to start their own business, I'm your gal, and I would love to help you do that. On to the main show here. Today, what we're talking about is culture. And we're going to talk about 4 different components. First is defining what culture is. The second, we're going to talk about the costs of shitty culture. The third is we're going to talk about 8 distinct culture types. Everybody has one of these 8, oftentimes multiple of these 8. And we're going to talk about how to create company culture that supports your business goals instead of works against them. The elephant in the room here is really that hospitality has a staffing issue. And it is not because of the economy. It's not because of unemployment checks. It is not because nobody wants to work. It is because of culture. And I have worked in the hospitality industry in a number of different ways, whether I was in restaurants, whether I was in 5-star hotels, whether I was in restaurant companies that had multiple high volume units, whether I was in small independently owned, don't even have a POS, writing down everything on paper. I did tell you I was 40. That might age me a little bit, but we've already checked that off the list of things that we've done here today. So I've worked in a number of different capacities, and there is a chronic issue within the hospitality industry of creating toxic work environments, of not respecting the people that are working within the industry, of low wages, crappy development and training programs, lack of benefits or reinvestment into staff, employees being treated as expendable. These are things that if you've been in the industry for any amount of time, you have seen, you have likely experienced. And it is this reason why, especially in the post-pandemic world, we're finding it challenging to convince people to get into the hospitality industry, and once they're in it, to stay in it, or to have any amount of loyalty to the places that they are employed. Now, before you start thinking to yourself, not all companies, I know that. We all know that, right? It's not all companies that have staffing issues either, but we're specifically talking about the staffing issues through the lens of culture today. And so if you are one of those companies that does not have a staffing problem and you have an amazing culture, this isn't a webinar for you. And congratulations, we need more of you. So please teach your friends how to be the same. I'm going to read a quote by Danny Meyer. I'm from New York, and he was a huge inspiration to me early in my career. And he's kind of crushed it as an entrepreneur and a restaurateur. But he specifically spends a lot of time, money, effort, and energy in developing culture. And he says, human beings have a deep-seated need to belong. And if our culture is so sticky that everyone wants to belong to it, staff wants to belong to the brand, customers want to be seen wearing your thing, using your thing, walking down the street with a bag that's got your label on it because of what it says about them, then you've got the ultimate competitive advantage. And I love that. And we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to break that down a little bit. What is culture? I like wordplay. Culture, cult, we already know what that means, right? And in the ending there, URE denotes an action, process, or result. So culture is essentially the process of creating a cult, a shared set of workplace beliefs, values, attitudes, standards, purposes, behaviors, and it's written and unwritten. The magic of culture is that it directly impacts how people feel and behave, right? So how people feel in the workplace and the emotions that they have directly impact how people perceive reality. And that drives behavior. And behavior is how they show up, not only in the workplace when they're dealing with management, but also how they show up with other employees and how they show up with your guests and how they show up on a daily basis. So culture directly impacts how people behave. And some of it's overt and some of it's covert. Some of it is informal. Some of it isn't even something that was intentional, but it's still there. So when we think about culture, we're not just talking about the things that we are intending to show up in the way that our company is formed. We're talking about all the ways that being in and around and connecting with the entity makes and drives behavior. Shitty culture is expensive to a business. It leads to higher turnover, poor morale, challenges hiring new talent, tarnished reputation, suppressed growth because we're constantly focusing on staffing and training and staffing and training and staffing and training, and also decreased customer satisfaction. A great example of that is what we're seeing currently, depending on when you're watching this. This is the September 2022 timeframe. Currently, we're seeing a huge amount of issues in the air transportation sector. And studies have shown, people who study this thing, that it's largely driven by inexperienced and new staff. Now, we had a huge staffing shortage for a really long time, and now they've filled all of those roles, and now they are new. They haven't been on the job long enough to kind of know the insides, the outsides, the training. They don't have institutional knowledge. A lot of those that did have institutional knowledge can't even pass it on because they have by now left. And so what they're finding is that we have a whole lot of issues. Two planes actually ran into each other, their wings, because someone had misjudged the distance between them because they were new. And we see this a lot in hospitality as well. And I can speak through the lens of restaurants. A new expediter, a new host, a new server, a new line cook, a new bar manager, any of those things without the institutional knowledge and the time, they're going to do things slower. So we're going to lose some efficiency there, which obviously costs us a little bit more money. They're going to do things to a less satisfactory degree because you got to, fail quite a bit before you get it right. And it's going to cost you money for a variety of different reasons, right? So shitty culture leads to high turnover, poor morale, a whole bunch of expensive things. And I love this quote here, and I don't know who said it, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you've got plans for growth, if you've got plans for higher profit margins, you can kiss them goodbye if your culture isn't strong enough to support staff wanting to stay or staff not feeling safe, so that you're constantly having to put out fires, HR issues. All of that is expensive, and it prevents businesses from achieving their strategic goals. But I'm not here just to point out problems. I am, however, going to talk about a few caveats that I would like to point out. So things to keep in mind. The first is we need to be aware of culture hijacking. Culture, as I mentioned before, can be intentional or unintentional. So you either set it up and protect it, or it'll get set up for you. So let's say you want a culture that is collaborative, fun, easygoing, because this is, a place that you have created or you are building, and you want that to be your culture. But you hire a manager who is very strict and demanding and authoritative. There's a clash in culture there. And as a result, your culture, what you have chosen, doesn't get top billing, because culture needs to be expressed, and it needs to be practiced, and it needs to be communicated, and it needs to be something that is prevalent. And if you have leadership, or if you have a bad apple server that is undermining culture, then you have a misalignment, and that is almost going to be like, if you're playing on the piano and someone strikes a wrong chord, it's going to ruin the music. And so there's no such thing as a company with no culture, but it is not easy to maintain culture. And if it's not intentional and protected, then you're going to get misalignment. And that is, in my experience, the vast majority of issues in the hospitality industry. It's not that the company itself doesn't have good intentions or have an established set of values and culture that they would like to pass on. It's that they're not living their values, and they're not protecting the culture. So whether or not you're intentional or unintentional about your values, if you're not protecting it, then your culture can very quickly and very easily get away from you. The other thing that I want to mention is that shitty culture is relative. So I use the quote here, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And there is no perfect culture for everyone. Everyone is different, and they want different things from their workplace. So I have this little example here. If Tiffany does not love working in a salty dive bar where sarcasm is the first language, and regular dude Joe drops outdated one-liners every chance he gets, it doesn't mean that it isn't the perfect workplace for Gretchen. It just means it's not the right place for Tiffany. And so whatever your dream culture is a perfectly suitable work environment for someone. The trick is you have to be intentional about what you want your culture to be. Then you need to be transparent about what the culture is, and you need to make it obvious during the hiring and the training process so that people can self-select out. So if your dream culture is a little bit salty and sarcastic, there are people out there that thrive in those conditions. Sarcasm is my second language, so I'm one of those people. I love a good dive bar. And so don't feel like it needs to be the Hilton, or it needs to have or look a certain way. Culture can be anything you want it to be, but it needs to be intentional. What are the benefits of having great culture? Reduced turnover, improved customer experience, higher productivity, increased revenue and profits, improved morale, decreased staffing costs, stronger reputation. It's essentially all the opposites of all of the cost of a crappy culture. But these are the things that, as a business owner, I want to see. I want to see all of these things. And so I can do that by managing culture. So there are 8 distinct types of culture. Now, there are a number of words on this sheet, and I don't know if my little face is in the way, so I'm going to move it because it is in the way for me. So I'm just going to move that there. The first word in every single bullet point here is the main word that you're going to see over on this graph. And so we have caring, purposeful, learning, enjoyable, results-oriented, authoritative, safe, and orderly. Now, if you look across the entire hospitality sector, you would be able to identify an organization or a business that falls into every single category. So we're not looking at like the top right quadrant and saying you should be here. What we are saying is that there are 8 that this is actually the Harvard Business Review identified, did a whole bunch of studies, and they identified these particular 8. Now you can be both caring and orderly. Your culture can have those 2 things. Now you might find friction if you were trying to be super result oriented, but also caring. And so, if you're trying to be collaborative and supportive and you're also driven by achievement and winning, there might be some tension there. So that might not be the easiest one to pull off, but you probably wouldn't have too much of a problem with caring and order. Right. And so if we look at this and we just you will probably be inherently drawn to like 1 or 2 over the others. And then we can kind of look to see what that looks like. So let's say we wanted to be enjoyable, fun, and stimulating. Probably wouldn't do very well also being authoritative, competitive, and controlling. Those 2 are not going to do well together. But if we wanted to be maybe order, we could do orderly, methodical, and cooperative, as well as being fun and stimulated and enjoyable, right? So those 2 might work really well together. These are all driven by 2 main factors: how people respond to change and how people interact. So you'll see there's a ton of independence over here, and then there's more interdependence, teamwork over here. We have some restaurants where there's a tip pool and people are happy as clams in that. And we have some restaurants where people will literally slit you if you try and pool their tips, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with either. I love a great tip pool. As long as the culture is that everyone's pulling their weight. If I'm in a tip pool and I'm the only one doing any work, obviously there's tension there, but that's because culture is not being protected in the hiring process, right? And so we're going to talk about that. Move my little face back. So how do we create great culture? Now, I already told you, there's no perfect culture and there's a culture for everyone, but there are some foundations that we should see across the board. And again, they're a little bit relative. So the first thing is we want to foster an environment where people feel safe. That is the literal bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's not an option. We've got to make a place or a space where people feel safe. If someone feels safe around sarcasm, then it doesn't matter if that's part of the culture, because I like sarcasm. If I don't like sarcasm, then I don't want to be in a place where the part of the culture is salty and sarcastic, right? So I wouldn't feel safe if I didn't like that. And so we want to make sure that the culture is clear and transparent enough that people can opt in or opt out based on how they feel. So we want to foster an environment where our people, the people that resonate with the culture we're trying to create, feel safe. If you don't feel safe, then you will not function on any of the higher levels. Your reasoning skills go out the window. You're literally just trying to preserve yourself. Okay. So we want to foster an environment where people feel safe, whatever that looks like for your particular culture. We also want to ensure people feel valued for their talents. It looks like I forgot an F there, for their talents and their time. So real quick story. I used to work at a restaurant that would keep someone on call every shift. And this was back during the 2007, 2008 recession. So it was very much like this, where there was a staffing issue, but not because there weren't people who wanted to work, but because nobody was hiring. I was at a 5-star hotel at the time and we were on a hiring freeze. So we couldn't just pull someone in. Okay. And so we had someone on call and we called them in, and then one of the other managers decided that we didn't have enough reservations, so we didn't actually need them. So she called them and called them off, basically. And that particular server for us had been with us for like 8 years. She was a mom, and because she had gotten called in, she had called her babysitter, and she was almost on the way here, and we were in DC, and so like that's a lot of traffic and time. And she was really upset about that. And so she, made us aware of the fact that when we do that, we cost her money because she had to pay for the babysitter's time. And she's not making any money in return. And so my proposition at that time was that we would pay people to be on call. Now, they didn't go for it, but I wanted to value people for being on call and not doing other things and not picking up other shifts. And that was one of the solutions that I had, because I felt like we should be valuing people for, hanging around and not doing whatever else they wanted to do, and potentially also incurring costs on behalf of being on call. The point here being, it's one thing to pay, right? To pay well, or not pay well. It's one thing to pay people for their time. But we also have to recognize that there's a lot of hidden costs in time for being employed. And so we want to respect people, not just by paying them for the work that they do, but also for the energetic space holding that they're doing on behalf of our company, and so that they feel valued as a whole person, and not just, hey, I only have you, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and you are valuable to me in those days, in those hours, right? We want to value them as a whole, because our business, they're working for us, right? They're making us a part of their lives. Sorry about that. And we want them to feel valued for that. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to hire for culture fit. We can always train for skill, but we cannot change somebody's comfortability with culture. So we want to hire for that. Okay, hire for culture. We also want to invest in a strong onboarding and alignment program. And so we don't just throw people to the wolves unless that's your culture. If your culture is very much sink or swim, then you need to hire people who do well in sink or swim. Now, most people don't. And so we want to make sure that if we have a culture, which is probably 90% of where we don't have a culture of, just sinking and swimming, that we invest in a really strong onboarding and alignment program. Now, I will tell you that if you were to look at all the studies, onboarding programs are rated pretty low as to how that impacts people's perception of culture. So this isn't like a high priority. It's probably like 30% of people say that a strong onboarding and alignment program is really helpful for them. But 30% is, 1 in 3 people. And so having the ability to bring people on and give them structure and teach them what they need to know to succeed. And then also what I mean by alignment program is the ability to touch various different parts of their job. And so if they're a server, for example, that they get to spend some time at the kitchen and maybe on expo and at the host stand. Now, some are very good at this and some are not very good at this, right? And so just making sure that we warm people in instead of throw them to the wolves, because unless they're really good at that, then that can be really off-putting and hard for them to get ramped. And then lastly, that we build in opportunities to recognize and reward. That is like human-wide, we like to feel recognized and rewarded for our work. Now, what that looks like, that's going to be different, right? In tech, they like to give people nap pods and pizza, lunches. And what we're learning, a decade, 15 years in, is that what people really want are benefits. They want money. They want time off. They want recognition in other ways aside from here's a pat on the back or, a plaque on the wall that you're employee of the month. Some people really love that, but a very small amount of people really love that. So figure out within your culture, what are the type of people that are drawn to your culture? What lights them up? What makes them feel recognized and rewarded? You got to actually do some digging and some work there. So how do we change and shift culture? Let's say you have not been intentional with your culture, or the culture you have, which you have a culture. There's no such thing as no culture. So you have a culture. And let's say that culture is just not working for you. You find that you do have high turnover, that you don't have a great reputation. It's super hard for you to hire new people. And when you do, they don't last very long. And so you're constantly on the hiring treadmill. Let's talk about how to shift that. The first thing is that you need to share the new intended culture values with everybody that is on your team. They're not to be kept secret. We need to make sure everybody is aware of what the culture is. We also then need to hire and select leaders and managers that embody that culture. These are the things that they need to be exuding in everything that they do. Okay, they need to be walking emblems of the culture that you're trying to instill. Then we need to allow people to self-select themselves in or out. And I don't care if that person has been with the company for 8, 10, 12 years. If they are not the embodiment of the culture that you're trying to create because you want your company to start achieving its strategic goals, to growing and hitting the growth goals that you have, it really everyone needs to be in alignment. And I've had so many hiring, firing conversations, and it usually is super easy if you're transparent about what the values are and you're holding people accountable to those values. It usually looks a little bit like this. This isn't working out, is it? And they will tell you, no, this really isn't working out for me. Great. I think it's important that you be in a place that has a culture and a structure that you really thrive in for your own good. I agree. Thank you so much. Now, obviously, there are sometimes more emotions than that because the hospitality industry is full of people with an immense amount of emotion. And that is a beautiful thing because it is the only thing that enables us to be as just amazing as we are, work clopens, be on our feet for 14 hours a day, to work in an environment that has every insurance person's plethora of nightmares: fire, knives, alcohol, slippery surfaces, people with, I already said knives, aggressive backgrounds, criminal records. Like, the hospitality industry is the last refuge for the rebel, and I love it. But we need to align the people in that industry with the culture of the organization. So it doesn't matter what your background is, if you were in the right place and the culture is a right fit for your skill set, the company will thrive, and vice versa. All right. And so the last step is to reinforce culture through accountability and organizational design. Accountability means if you've got a bad apple, you get rid of that bad apple. I've worked for a restaurant company. I was there for 5 years, and we had this general manager who was an absolute dick. Everyone knew he was a dick. He ruled with an iron fist. Nobody felt safe around him. He was an absolute trash panda. But he got results on that P&L, not in a great way, but he managed to get results on that P&L, and so corporate kept him. But it really destroyed the culture. And so what ended up happening was that we had a largely male staff. We had decreased diversity in the people that were working there. And the females that did tough it out were not happy and probably still have horror stories. And like, we don't want that. We don't want that. And that P&L actually was not great forever. He was able to hold it pretty strong for a while because, again, culture oftentimes has a lag. And so, he was really good at managing to keep it really strong for some time. And then issues. How is this guy having all of these issues? The corporate couldn't figure it out. He was always so great. Like, what changed? What happened? It was just lag. It was lag. He wasn't able to keep it up, and the culture couldn't support it. And so ultimately it didn't work out, but it took corporate forever. Don't take forever, because then it took a long time to repair that culture and get that restaurant back on track. We don't want that. All right, I covered a lot in a little bit of time, but hopefully I gave you some good indications of what shitty culture looks like and the damage it can do to a business. Also, what a good, solid culture looks like, and how to, one, be intentional about creating good, solid culture, and also how to implement it once you've decided what you want that culture to be. If you want additional support from me and my team, we love this kind of thing, and we would love to talk to you further. You can email at hello@mobilebevpros, or you can hit up our website at mobilebevpros.com. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Supplier Summit.